loved about being in this profession of recreation is we get to help people find things that they like to do, that they love to do, that they enjoy. Nobody else gets to do that. We get to do that as recreation people. So part of it, our professional responsibilities is, I think, give people skills and give them opportunities to find enjoyment. And when you like to do something, it's a lot easier to figure out how you're going to find the time and sometimes even the money to do those particular kinds of things.
Other questions?
Yes. Back in the 70s, you published an article in the Journal of Outdoor Ed, which is now defunct, and it was on outdoor activities. And going with that notion of more of a traditional outdoor education perspective and the fact that it's pretty much gone now, do you see any avenues for revitalizing that notion, of which Luke does talk about in his book, and its usefulness in what we could do at this sort of level? Because there are hardly any at all outdoor education programs for education left.
Right. Well, that's a good question. I really am not sure, other than I think if there's enough people who recognize this as being a really important problem that we need to address, we'll hopefully figure out something. It's kind of like when people back in early 1900s thought that it was unhealthy living in cities and that they needed to design camps and get kids out in order to do that kind of thing. I think because there was a problem, they sought a response to it. And I'd like to think that may happen again. I think this No Child Left Inside legislation is pretty interesting because it's gaining a lot of impetus with a lot of different groups. And there's a number of potentials for that, but it would certainly, part of the possibility is that it would really suggest that schools need to include some kind of outdoor education back into the curriculum, whether it's infused with other classes or we go back to some of the ways it used to be where all the 4th graders or 6th graders or whatever went to camp.
So is that something that you see needs to be pushed from our level, and really promoted into programs here, developed university levels, to teach outdoor educators and teachers as there's some cross-disciplinary work with a school of education and a recreation.
I think it'd be a great opportunity if we could figure out some ways to do some of those kinds of things. I mean, the other thing, it's got to be done on a whole lot of different fronts. Those of us interested in parks and recreation and camping, we can have something to do with it, but we're not going to be able to do it alone. And so we're going to have to figure out ways to work with other people with it.
I guess that's the same issue they had in the 70s.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Karla. I want to change direction just a little bit and tell you a little human interest story about Ray Carlson. Dr. Wilkerson referred to Dr. Carlson as a naturalist. He went over to Europe once on a lecture series, and he was in Europe, in Germany, and he had billed himself as a naturalist. And so his host said, this afternoon we're going to do something that you very much enjoy doing. And so they got in the car and they rode out to a nudist colony. He was a very proper, sort of precise man who was considerably shaken by the generosity of his host.
I want someone to ask a better question. Yes, please.
You know, you spoke in the end about having fun. And one of your slides I really enjoyed was the 3 young boys playing a video game. And statistics on video games, specifically like massive multiplayer online role-playing games and these synthetic worlds, is pretty incredible. Where you see hundreds of thousands in 2001, now you're seeing 30 million, 50 million estimated right now. And so as a percentage of the population is increasing and expected to increase considerably. But the reason people are going on is because they're having fun. So is nature relevant in the sense of having fun in it? Because there's this low cost, very low cost to the individual, opportunity to have fun. You don't have to drive anywhere, you don't have to have any gear, you don't have to get cold. Is it relevant?
I think that's really, really good question, and I've often, or recently thought a lot about it in terms of camping, because when you think about the fast pace and the color and all the stuff that happens in a video game and that kind of interaction, and then you think about, going to the outdoors. I mean, for me, it's clearly, superior to be in that outdoor environment, and yet if you really have not, it's such a different environment. And I guess what I think it is hard to compete with that, but it's going to continue. It's going to be harder and harder if kids never have the other experience, at least to compare it with. And certainly there are children, not all, but many, when they find out how exciting and fun it can be to be in nature, that's another alternative that they might have. But if they've never had that experience, they're never going to know what that's about. But the challenge is, how do we get them out there? We got parents who are having fewer and fewer of those experiences, are going to have less and less contact in that way. It's a very difficult, kind of situation. I don't really have a good answer for it, except I guess I do think that if we can expose kids to nature in some ways that are fun, and not just going out and having to list the name of plants, although I don't think there's anything wrong with this. There's some evidence that suggests if you can name things, you're more likely to be connected with them. But I don't think most kids are interested in that kind of stuff. We got to figure out ways that somehow they can capture the excitement of this natural world. But it's easy for me to say, because I have that experience, and I look for it and can't wait for that. But I think we're just going to have to make sure that kids do have alternatives, and that's probably what part of my big message is let's try to figure out ways we can still get kids in the outdoors and find a different kind of enjoyment. Or again, I go back to, it's not one or the other. I think it can be both. But we've got to figure out how to get those both opportunities available to kids and ourselves.
I'm hearing nature outside.
You just get your hearing nature calling or something.
Better word. One more question. If everyone has one question, then we'll call this the last question. With that, we have a little. Yes, please, right behind you.
I was intrigued by your person on the bicycle.
Oh.
And I read something today in nursing where you said it was going to national colleges were going to spend like $3.2 billion on fitness equipment in the next 5 years. How do you feel that fitness equipment might have impacted those nature deficits?
Well, it's pretty interesting, particularly with children, but I also think it's true of adults in a lot of ways. But most children don't do things because it's good for them. Some of us adults do things because it's good for us. Children don't.